All right, let's dive into a scientific discovery that, believe it or not, affects every single one of us every single day. It's a story all about the sun, but here's the twist. Its biggest secret is something we literally can't see.
Think about that question for a second. For centuries, humanity thought sunlight was pretty simple. It was warmth, and it was the colors of the rainbow. But it turns out we were missing a huge piece of the puzzle, an invisible force that quietly shapes almost everything about life on Earth.
So who was the person who started to unravel this whole mystery? A guy named Johann Wilhelm Ritter, and he was not your average scientist. In fact, his close friend, the famous poet Novalis, put it best. He saw Ritter as a kind of genius, a knight forging ahead while everyone else was just trying to keep up.
Now, to really get what Ritter did, we've got to rewind the clock a bit, back to the early 1800s. This was an amazing time, a time when the biggest questions about how nature worked were still totally up for grabs.
And Ritter, well, he was basically the poster child for this era. This guy was brilliant, totally obsessive, and sometimes he'd just lock himself in his room for weeks on end, chasing this idea of a single unifying force in nature. He was so driven that he actually did painful electrical experiments on his own body, even running a current through his own eyes, just to understand how it all worked.
Now, Ritter wasn't just pulling this idea out of thin air. Just the year before his big breakthrough, the astronomer William Herschel found something amazing: invisible rays beyond the red end of the spectrum. We now call it infrared. Well, that got Ritter's gears turning. If there was an invisible force on one end of the spectrum, could there be another one on the opposite end, out past the violet?
And that one simple question led him straight to his moment of discovery, with an experiment that was, honestly, just beautiful in its simplicity.
So here's what he did. In a dark room, he took a prism and split a beam of sunlight into a rainbow, just like Herschel had done. But instead of using a thermometer, he used paper that was coated in silver chloride, a chemical he knew would turn black when exposed to light. He laid it out, and sure enough, he watched the paper darken, and it got darker and darker as he moved from red towards violet. But here's the leap. Here's the stroke of genius. He took a fresh piece of paper and put it in the empty, dark space just past the violet light.
And the result? Whoa! It was incredible. In that totally dark spot, where there was no visible light at all, the paper turned black more intensely and faster than anywhere else. He had found it. An invisible, super-reactive kind of light.
He called his discovery chemical rays, and it's a great name, right? It perfectly described their powerful chemical effect on his paper, and it was a neat contrast to Herschel's heat rays. Of course, today we know them by a different name: ultraviolet radiation, or as you probably know it, UV.
Now, Ritter's discovery, it did more than just add a new invisible color to the spectrum. No, it blew the doors wide open on a whole new dimension of reality. And scientists all over Europe just started racing to map this invisible world.
And man, the pace of discovery just took off. In 1865, James Clerk Maxwell's work put UV light into the bigger picture of the whole electromagnetic spectrum. Then, fast forward to 1921, and we discover the ozone layer, our planet's built-in UV shield. And then just a few years later, in 1928, the story takes a bit of a darker turn, when a scientist proved for the first time that this invisible light could actually cause cancer in animals. And if you want proof of just how massive this field became, get this: 37,466. That's how many scientific papers on UV radiation were published in just one medical database between 1960 and 2001 alone. Ritter really had opened the floodgates.
So this is where the story gets really complex, because the more we learned, the more we realized that Ritter's invisible rays were this profound paradox. They were a powerful force for both good and bad, a true double-edged sword.
On the one hand, UV radiation is absolutely essential for us. It lets our bodies create vitamin D, which cures diseases like rickets. It can even be used to kill deadly bacteria. That discovery won a Nobel Prize. But, and this is a big but, the dangers are just as serious. UV is what causes sunburn, it can lead to cataracts, and most importantly, it can cause genetic mutations that lead to skin cancer.
And that brings us right up to today, because this whole story of discovering UV radiation, it's not just history, it's a story that you and I are living in every single time we step outside.
Just think about that journey for a second. Humanity went from literally worshiping the sun as a god to using it in folk medicine,
all the way to understanding at a quantum level how these invisible photons are interacting with our very own DNA. That is a huge leap.
And this quote from the historian Philip Hochberger really just nails our modern view. He points out that the evidence shows UV light isn't simply good or bad. It all depends. It depends on the organism, the specific wavelength, and, most importantly, the dose. It's a relationship that's all about balance.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big lingering question, doesn't it? After 2 whole centuries of incredible science, from Ritter's simple darkened room to our deep knowledge of DNA damage, have we really truly figured out how to live in balance with our sun's most powerful invisible secret?